Tell us about empathy, what you set out to do and where you're at right now and why you think it's so important.
Empathy is the friend you wish you had when you lose a loved one. That's what we want it to be, and that's what we're building. We understand it's a very lonely moment in life. By definition, you just lost a loved one, and we want to help with the full range of grief and estate needs, and we don't think you can decouple the two. We strongly believe that grief is made hard by logistics, and logistics are made so much harder by grief. So you have to come up with one comprehensive solution that will be both your headspace for grief, but also your TurboTax for estate settlement, because you eventually want to save people time and money and headaches. And if we do that, then we take this inescapable part of life and we humanize it. We make loss a little bit less hard. Hi, I'm Ron Gura. I'm co-founder and CEO at Empathy, and my core value is empathy.
What a surprise. It is a pleasure to introduce to Invested Ron Gura, co-founder and CEO of Empathy.com. Ron is a tech entrepreneur who has brought his love for developing empowering products to startups and major international corporations. As senior vice president at WeWork, Ron started and oversaw a global R&D center of 250 team members responsible for the tools and systems that helped the company scale operationally. Previously, Ron served as an entrepreneur in residence right here at Aleph. Prior to that, Ron served as a product director and general manager at eBay, leading its business incubation organization. Ron joined eBay as a result of the 2011 acquisition of the Gifts Project, a social commerce startup where he served as co-founder and CEO. Ron, welcome to Invested.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you back in the Aleph office. By the way, I couldn't remember. They asked me, how do we know each other? By the look on your face, you're also not sure how we know each other.
I remember the first meeting. It was definitely here on the boulevard, and you were definitely with that iconic scarf.
On Rothschild Boulevard. So it must be in the winter.
But I don't know, who technically made the introduction. I'm gonna guess it's Eden, and I'm gonna look up this. I'm gonna look this up later.
You still have your calendar from back then?
Yeah, I can do it. Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive. Okay, so we started here on the boulevard, and you joined. Before we get that, what would you say are like kind of the core values broadly that animate you?
We use the word empathy not just as a brand, but as a core value. But I do think it has a lot of virtues. It's not just about compassion or about kindness. I think it's about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And that translation of empathy I wear very comfortably, because it's also about product. It's also about talent acquisition.
What about product and talent acquisition has to do with empathy?
So the basic of every product manager, every designer, is to put yourself in the customer's shoes. Like say you're working on a web page, on a mobile app design, even writing content for the CTA on a button. What would the consumer feel? What would the consumer understand? What type of concerns they might have at this stage? What information is lacking? So the ability to imitate someone else's thought process is very productive and very helpful for sales, for hiring, for design, for product management. But eventually, it's a very simple human ability.
Not everybody has that trait of being able to kind of put themselves in somebody else's shoes. The rabbis famously say that one should not judge their fellow until you've been in their place. And most of us haven't been in our fellow's place or our friend's place. How do you develop the ability to, what you call empathy and in your own interpretation to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to the point you can develop products for them? You understand what they're thinking when you recruit them. Where's it come from?
I think, to be honest, it's very self-serving. As a young, short child, you use different things that you kind come across to get what you want. So as the youngest brother or the shortest kid in the class, or so you understand like you need to find your angle in order to really influence the situation. A lot of people take that to humor, and that's how they get attention or get what they want eventually if they can't have the most force or the most influence. I think if I'm overanalyzing it, that as a young child, I understood I can anticipate what's in it for someone or what would motivate them in a, of course, completely different jargon. It would not be about us talking about conducting business, but it would be like, oh, what he really wants is to be the goalkeeper, or what this kid really wants is just to be included. It doesn't really matter if he's getting the blue collar or not, or whatever that is. I think it was self-serving. It was it was a tool I need to improve in order to have more influence about the situation.
So is it a value or a tool?
I think empathy is a value, and you break it down, it has components, tools, and virtues.
Does it have vices ever also?
What's that?
Does it have vices ever also? Like, if it's a tool and you can kind of figure out what people want, you can manipulate people too, right?
Yeah, I guess in a way, the sales-oriented approach of putting yourself in someone else's shoes is about manipulation. But the manipulation, of course, should be authentic in a way that it's only playing with the weights and not with the essence.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, by the way. I've always thought that you were very authentic as a person. We'll come to talk about that more when we talk about
I'll take it. Thank
empathy.
You.
But that line of what you called weights rather than essence, or degree versus what the foundational principle is a hard line. And by the way, it's getting harder, I think, as the world evolves, because there's so much more polarization out there. So how do you figure out, like, when you're putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and trying to get at something, whether you've crossed the line? Is it just a degree, the weights, or?
I think there's a very clear red line. If you need to remember what was said, or if you keep notes and to say, oh, that's the number I gave them, or that was the thing I said, then the essence was not true.
That's a great heuristic.
Because then it's basically it's not authentic anymore. You're just messing with something to create a new reality. And I think a lot of early stage founders, who by definition are doing sales across the board, overstep that line. And I actually want to ask you, you meet tons of early stage founders. Some of them are better communicators than others, but you also get to judge them in a way in the kind of test of time and see a year later, not if they succeeded in doing what they said, but if they meant it. So how do you judge it when someone says, I'm going to build this thing, but I'm never going to compromise on X, Y, and Z, or I'm going to get this executive to join me because I'm going to promise them X, Y, Z. So when you see it, you want the founder to be successful in that transaction, but where's your line?
First of all, it's really difficult. That's the first thing. And by the way, I thought I was interviewing you, not the opposite. But okay, it's a conversation. The element of trust is so critical in building a startup, is so critical, I think, in the investor-entrepreneur relationships, that when somebody oversteps the line in what I would call the heat of the moment, perhaps because it's kind of such a roller coaster to these startups, versus I missed something in their personality when I first invested. Look, you don't have endless amounts of time to make investment decisions. And I consider myself a reasonably good early judge of character. But we don't get it right all the time. We get it wrong sometimes. And this is a pressurized environment. And people also perform differently when the pressure heats up. There's a famous line from the rabbis where he says, "We don't judge a person bikoso," which means in his cup or when he's drunk, bikiso in his pocket, meaning when he's under financial stress, or bikaso in his anger when he's angry. I actually think you actually learn a lot in those circumstances, and that we can judge people because when they're under extreme pressure, oftentimes the true person comes out, the kind of true essence of the person comes out. And one slip up is one thing. Multiple slip ups is a fraying of trust, and that ultimately goes sideways. But interestingly, you're an empathy guy, and now your company's called Empathy, which we'll come back to. But your first company was called the Gifts Project, which is also something empathetic. People wanting to give gifts to others. Where did the idea for the Gifts Project come from, and why did you start with gifts?
So for the Gifts Project, it was very straightforward. My sister-in-law was living in California at the time with my brother, and she was learning more about the, let's call it, westernized gifting culture, wedding showers and baby registries and a lot of things we just don't have here at all. And she came up with an early version of the need to do a many-to-one versus just many-to-many. And that was basically a core, an early version of what later became group gifting. And I do feel like gifting is a beautiful, ancient, it's a beautiful thing that has been around since the Romans, and it's something that was never unlocked. People.
Why is gifting important?
Because it shows customization. It shows you care.
Really? Maybe it just shows that I feel obliged to give you a gift.
A lot of it is. I think.
I mean, that's kind of the whole cultural element. Showers. Really? Right. A shower? Another one?
Right.
Or I got even an engagement present and a wedding present and a baby moon present and a honeymoon present. I mean, really?
There's a good point there. I feel like...
By the way, I'll tell you, when I was getting married, they told me, there's the engagement ring and there's a wedding ring. And then there was this whole thing in the Orthodox Jewish world of New York, which was, and you get a watch from the in-laws and you get a this and you have to give the wife, I looked at this is nuts. Like, why is there forced gifting? That doesn't show anything.
Especially because financially it becomes a burden.
Yeah.
And the people who make up the benchmarks incentivized to say you should invest X amount of salaries or, Y amount of money. But when you kind of summarize everything I know about gifting into, just maybe under 1 minute, I would say there's definitely a spectrum with maybe a few dimensions here that is about how liquid is it? Is it cash? Is it an Amazon gift card? Is it a gift with a return policy? Or is it something DIY that you made? And how personalized it is. Is it something I made? Think about like the most iconic Western visual of gifting. A young child walks down the stairs, usually in an American movie, it's Christmas, and they see the Christmas tree and a lot of gifts, and he opens up the big box, and he sees something that his father handmade for them, for example. That would be the perfect example of a scheduled, triggered, personalized, surprise gift. You can still take some elements of this, like it's a gift, but it's not a surprise. It's a gift, but I'm asking you for your size first. It's a gift, but it's actually cash. And it will still be a gift. What I've learned in a few years working on this is if you change more than one thing, then the mind doesn't see this as a gift anymore.
Interesting.
You can say it's a gift, but it's not just from me, it's a few of us. It's a gift, but I want to tell you I'm buying it to you. But once it's like too many things connected, it's becoming this, like you said, a transaction of cultures.
Now, you sold the business to eBay. It's fair to say it wasn't a great business. Is that fair?
Yeah.
It was a good idea, but not a great business. Is that?
Yeah, we were doing nice revenue, but most of it was from eBay. It was
Right.
$1 million in revenue for early stage, but it was from, I think 850,000 was coming from the acquirer. So
Gifting turns out to be a hard business. Like there's been a bunch of attempts at this from, gift cards and gift card breakage. I think there was something called like something Monkey at some point.
right.
Maybe first round capital backed and
Yeah, Karma.
There's been a bunch of these and they turn out not to be great venture backed businesses. Oh, why?
Well, I'm still getting, every few months, one of the venture capitalists that is hearing a gifting pitch with, hey, I remember a guy that had something, I'll give him a call. By the way, sometimes from your partners here at Aleph as well. And it's interesting. I think it's still unlocked.
You think it's still unlocked or still locked? I mean, it still needs to be unlocked.
That's the essence. I think it's a problem. I'm not sure it needs to be solved.
Interesting.
And as founders, I think it's not enough to look for a great problem. You need to find something that needs to be solved. And ideally, there's more than one reason why you need to solve it, more than financial reasons, but it's actually meaningful. It's actually moving the needle. I think gifting should be messy.
Should be messy.
Yeah, you should think hard. I don't think I want.
It's human for it to be messy.
Right.
And so therefore it shouldn't look for a technological solution or an easy solution.
As usual, you want to take the mundane parts of transacting or shipping or packaging, and maybe those you can automate. But the thought process of what should Michael appreciate now when he's, God forbid, sick at home and I want to surprise him, that should be me thinking hard, messy. And the second that's going to be a one-click button, it's not going to be as meaningful to you either, because you're going to know. So I am hoping that all these showers and registries would gradually decline in excitement, even though I'm not sure that's the trend. And people will be more authentic about gifting as well. But I don't think it's a problem that needs to be solved right now.
That's actually a great segue. I'm not such a gifting guy. It's not my thing. And I'm bad at them. My wife would say I'm terrible at them. I forget to give people gifts. We have wedding gifts that I probably haven't given in years.
She's probably very good at it. So
she's excellent at it. You always have to marry the opposite.
You need a strong average.
No. Well,
in the house, you need a strong average.
In the house, you need a strong average, yeah. I think it's almost fair to say that you've been, in your kind of founding of companies, focused on life events, right? Gifting happens around life events, and now empathy.com or empathy, which is focused on not death, but on some level after death, as opposed to afterlife, by the way. This is not something metaphysical. This is really the real hard messiness and complexity and humanity for next of kin dealing with the passing of a loved one. Why are you so drawn to these life events?
I think that as humans, we need a common denominator. And what's the biggest common denominator in terms of a human story other than birth and loss? That's the one single thing that is inescapable, that we're all going to have. And that makes life events, including some that most of us will have, but not all of us, like a wedding or our own child, etc., really good stories and really meaningful moments of truth. And I think a moment of truth, like a birth or a loss, a life transition basically, has a lot of emotions. And that makes it not just very meaningful, but also a great story that a lot of people want to take part of.
So when we first sat down to talk about empathy on the porch over here, just outside, I think you said to me something like, you're probably not going to want to be a part of this because it's dealing with an unpleasant topic. And by the way, had you come to me about gifts, I would have thought I don't want to have a part of this. But trying to help people cope with loss feels like a much better and more important mission for a company. This really kind of talks to the point you made earlier about stuff that is routine but messy should be automated, but stuff that is authentic or needs to be authentic should be handled in a more human manner. I think I also said at the time that this is the perfect case for a company. Here I go back to the rabbis again. There's only one thing described as it's called in Hebrew chesed shel emet, which is kindness, which is truthful, authentic, which is how you help deal with loss and people who pass away because they can't return the favor ever. And so I was immediately taken by this difficult idea. By the way, parenthetically, the other thing Ron obsessed about other than next of kin dealing with loss was elevators, but that's for a different time maybe. So tell us about empathy, what you set out to do, and where you're at right now, and why you think it's so important.
Empathy is the friend you wish you had when you lose a loved one. That's what we want it to be, and that's what we're building. We understand it's a very lonely moment in life. By definition, you just lost a loved one, and we want to help with the full range of grief and estate needs, and we don't think you can decouple the two. We strongly believe that grief is made hard by logistics, and logistics are made so much harder by grief. So you have to come up with one comprehensive solution that will be both your headspace for grief, but also your TurboTax for estate settlement, because you eventually want to save people time and money and headaches. And if we do that, then we take this inescapable part of life and we humanize it. We make loss a little bit less hard. It's always going to be hard. You and I and some of our best friends run companies that are fun and perky. They're pink, they're purple, they're flashy, and they're funny. And I love those companies. We don't get to be that. We get to be the serious, complicated, messy, human, but hopefully extremely empowering brand that is helping you in your most challenging moments, when really you're basically facing not just the terrible loss, but also in a way, for the first time in a long time, you're contemplating your own self-mortality. You understand in a way, let's say you lost a parent. Something about us is acknowledging the fact that in many ways, we are next. And there's something about that, and God forbid, unnatural loss, that is even harder. And in Hebrew has its own words because it's so different than the natural life cycle. So that's what we set out to do. And
more painful words. It has more painful words about the unnatural losses of children or siblings, as the case may be. Yeah.
And in our specific case as a nation, it's also our national pathos. That's who we are, and that's what we do. And it's very different than Memorial Day, let's say, in many other countries.
So take a second and just describe, as a empathetic product manager, how you went through thinking what could be automated, what needed to be humanated, and how you kind of couple and decouple at times the grief and the logistics in a digital product. I mean, it's a digital product.
At the end of the day, they're not equals. So the emotional comes first. And at the end of the day, when you need to choose a brand, it's not
turbo probate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The first thing is acknowledging the situation, building a soothing workflow that is not adding more questions and adding more noise and more colors and more fleshy items to your situation. It's all about taking it down and understanding that things need to be very clear. But at the same time, many people don't want too much fluff and too much emotional support. They really have a set of tasks they need to get through in order to re-engage with life. And the biggest help you can be to them is if you can be short, infrequent, and accurate. And it's that broad array of needs that is really the challenge from a product standpoint. How do you solve for both? And in a nutshell, I would say you want to take away the paperwork as much as possible. Pre-fill documents. Don't ask the same question twice. Just kind of tell me once approach, and leave time for the things that matter the most. Spending time with the family, just doing memorialization, understanding what needs to happen, and processing everything.
You spent time, highly unusually, before launching the product, engaged a brand agency, everything down to the color scheme. You even invented a typeface. My memory is correct, right? I was on the board. We had to approve that. Well, why'd you do that? Like, you invented a typeface for empathy. Why?
I think there are not too many companies I would recommend of taking a brand first approach. I think in Tel Aviv, we barely see any of those. I would give our friends at Lemonade a shout out. I don't know, and say I view them as a brand first company. I'm not sure that's how Daniel and Shai would describe it, and they definitely have a lot of deep technology. But the first thing you say is, this is who we are, and the reason you need to do that in an area like end of life is because the biggest force in this ecosystem is aversion. The stronger than anything else, stronger than a grief, stronger than the paperwork. The reason that the vast majority of people don't do estate planning is just trying not to contemplate end-of-life decisions.
Nobody wants to deal with it.
Nobody wants to deal with it. Nobody wants to
Because
talk
they're afraid,
about it.
because it's painful, because...
It's telling you that it doesn't matter. It's reminding all of us that we're just human mortals, and we can't play the game of grief and of greed and fear if we remember that this is all just for a few more years. And it's very important to be able to deny it. It's a great force of human nature. And at the same time, it's a taboo topic. And taboo topics should be broken.
Yeah.
Every single one of the taboo if you don't speak about a problem, it doesn't mean it's going to go away.
Because people suffer in silence from it. They suffer from their grief in silence. They suffer from the logistical hell that is the paperwork, the probate, getting money out of locked bank accounts,
Probate
shutting
is
down
nuts,
social
okay?
media.
Probate is crazy. If you Google probate, you're getting like, can I avoid probate? What is probate? Do I really need to go through probate? People hate it. It's just takes another year, and it's just a terrible process. If we, you have probably, tons of apps on your phone right now that will help you get stuff done, and I can probably choose one out of 5 apps to get a ride back to my office, or 5 apps to get dinner tonight. But at the same time, we're not using all these workflows for such a big moment in life. Like, think about, break it down. Taxes, technology is great for taxes. Pre-filling forms, great. We do it every day. Collaborating with other people on a complicated task, great, terrific. Workflows.
And here you have multiple next of kin oftentimes you need to collaborate with.
Yeah, siblings and other family members and lawyers. And so why not? Just because it's a taboo topic and we're not speaking about it, we're not going to leverage all the knowledge and capabilities and workflows that are already out there and couple those into a beneficiary, next of kin oriented, next of kin centric product that can eventually save people time and money.
Just to put some numbers on this, how many people die in the United States every day?
They would be 10,000, give or take.
10,000 people die a day. By the way, I think a friend of ours at JP Morgan told me that JP Morgan loses something like 200 employees a day or some crazy number like that. Or maybe it was 200 customers. I can't remember what it was. It was a large number.
Definitely don't want to recall the wrong number here, but I would say it's closer to 2,000 customers
A day.
That would make sense because
Right.
What's the market share for JP Morgan? Let's say 20%, give or take. So out of the 10,000, that's 2,000 times a day that someone's going to knock on a door and say, you know what, I'm not a customer, but my dad was, and I need to close the bank account, for example.
How long does that take normally?
It's like 18 months median.
18 months. And how much money do you assume is locked in these accounts in the interim period when people are trying to shut down the accounts of somebody who passed away?
Oh, of course, the averages don't help here,
Right.
because it could be anything from nothing to millions. But at the end of the day, it's how much money you spend. We speak so much about the cost of living and the rising cost of living, but we hardly speak or give any thought to the cost of dying, when it's not a surprise at all that we're going to need that money, not just for the immediate arrangements and the lawyers and processing and moving the house. And it's basically going to be a nice 5-digit number that an average American family is going to spend. They don't have that money on average. Like, it's very difficult.
How many cell phone accounts do you think Verizon or AT&T needs to shut down a day for people who died? Thousands.
I would keep it at the same, like, top of the envelope calculation. Let's say Verizon has 25% market share. AT&T, I think, has something like that as well, give or take 30%, 25%. So it would be something like 3,000 phone calls a day that have no substance, no upsell. Nothing good is going to come out of those conversations. It's going to be, hey, where's John? Like, no, I told you John's not here. I need the credentials. No, I don't have the credentials. Like, it's happening.
Technology can help with this, obviously, instead of having a human being answer the phone.
These calls should never happen.
Right.
And definitely not for 42 vendors on average. So, for example,
42 vendors and accounts need to be shut down per person who passes away.
On average.
On average.
They have a lot more, but a lot of those just, people just keep going and it doesn't matter.
And the next of kin, the people who survive, spend, what's the average amount of time they spend doing this?
420 hours on winding down the affairs of the loved one. And I'm putting aside anything that is emotional, because
that's just
grief has no timeline, and it's very different for different people.
Now, you hired a chief grief officer, David Kessler, who literally wrote the book on grief. That's an odd decision for a technology company that generally focuses on efficiency. And it's embedded in the app, many of his short podcasts on grief.
We couldn't be prouder to have a domain expert on grief and loss, like David, taking an active executive role at the company. He literally wrote the books with Kubler-Ross on the stages of grief and finding meaning.
And people spend time listening to these podcasts?
A lot of time. A lot of our engaged users are spending time basically re-engaging with life in a way and finding purpose and meaning. A lot of that is audio, like you mentioned, but also a lot of it is long form. People have a lot of questions when they lose a loved one. And right next to, using our tools to deactivate accounts or find out if they deserve money from Social Security or the Veteran Administration or automate another process, they then flip hats, usually different hours, usually at night. And then they read about grief and gender. And they listen to audio about grief and guilt. And people have a lot of questions.
Stuff, as we like to call it.
A lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff. So I want to kind of toggle on this issue of authenticity, humanity, technology, what works to get something, done and, clear my clutter, my paperwork, get that account deactivated. And I need my headspace and I need some help to grieve. So you launched a little service, which was ChatGPT or AI, artificial intelligence, to write obituaries, right? These little things that people write for their loved ones. And when you called me and told me you were going to do that, I said, oh, this is interesting. It will be a less authentic obituary. And you said something to me fascinating. You said there's a lot of mental overhead in writing an obituary, and maybe if we can lessen that a bit. And so I'm interested in both sides of this, which is, what was your thought process in launching AI or ChatGPT for obits? Mm-hmm. And the other side of it is, did people actually react and say, oh, thanks for lessening my burden? Or do they say, this is not really who my mother or father or uncle was?
So Obituary is a small yet meaningful part of the first chapter of winding down someone's affairs. Everything about the immediate arrangements, informing others, the ceremony, the eulogy, the of course obituary, and it's really just a portion of what we do and what we look at. But we did notice at our enterprise premium accounts that get professional content writers to help them write the obituary and make sure they're happy with a perfect, ready to be published piece, that what you really need to do is improve the input. And that is really great for AI. AI is really as good, the AI output is as good as the input. If you ask ChatGPT, for example, a simple question, it's not going to be as good as if you're getting a more detailed one. And what makes a good obituary, at least in the American format, is making sure you haven't forgot the basics, like did he serve in the military? Did he leave anyone behind? Did he have any meaningful hobbies? His education, etc. So what we did is we took our regular enterprise offering and we sliced and diced a small part of it and made that as a freebie for everyone to lower the barrier and democratize access to grief on that sense. Exactly because what you said. It looks like I need to write an obituary, but many of us, not you, but many of us are not writers. And asking us on one of our hardest days in our lives to now take pen and paper and write the perfect piece that will ideally remember our loved one perfectly is a lot of unneeded pressure right now. We need some guidance. I'm not saying let's outsource this thing. What the AI would do is bring you a really nice draft. Really nice draft instead of someone charging you
And what do people react to this?
about it.
Like, what do people think about this?
You can look at the reviews for that specific tool. It's great. It's 4.8. People really appreciate that. It saves them more than anything else, time and money. It's a really difficult day. But I do want to make sure that it's decoupled from our obituary tool,
Sure.
which is in the enterprise offering. This is where an expert content writer is writing one for you.
So I want to go back to talk about what you said about earlier, empathy and recruiting people. It's part of what helps you in your toolkit. Probably working at empathy is not for everybody. You need a certain amount of mental fortitude and empathy for the clients that you're dealing with and the customers you're dealing with. Who comes to work at empathy? Why do they work at empathy? And how do you know if they're cut out for this?
I think at the very early days, like telling the first employee and the second employee that Jan, my co-founder, and I want to work on this mission and this problem domain was indeed challenging. But after like the first 10 people, and definitely now basically 70 strong, it actually becomes a great superpower for talent acquisition because you have something that is mission-driven by definition. You don't need to take a long minute and explain how is this helping, users at the end of the day, or how is the infrastructure we're building here will help that machine and that back office, and eventually will help the consumer or the small medium business. No, it's very straightforward. We help families deal with loss, and at the beginning, there was a challenge kind of refining the messaging. And now at this point, it's very rewarding by definition because you see those 5-star reviews coming in and you see what people are writing every day.
But is there a certain kind of person who comes to work at empathy, or can anybody do this now that we help families deal with loss? Yeah, I see people turn up to comfort people who are dealing with loss. Not everybody can speak at these places. Not everyone knows exactly where their place is. It's challenging.
Now, I would definitely set apart our care managers. That's our human-centric call center that have dedicated care managers, like your quarterback for loss, and they're helping you with everything the app can do for you. You have a 24/7 helpline. That
And do they have a certain background, or there's certain
There's
kinds
licensed social workers. They're all
licensed social workers?
Yeah, so not anyone can be a licensed social worker. That's
Right.
for sure. But designers, data people, engineers, yes, many of them had a meaningful life event that gave them some perspective.
Interesting.
Many of them, a lot of the people who reach out to us every day, and it's frankly it's challenging because someone would write me a long, detailed note like they would write the CEO next to me. But in this case, it's not going to be about you. I have to work it simply because I love music. They're going to write me, I have to work at empathy because I lost both of my parents or God forbid, a child.
How many of those do you get a week?
Probably 10.
10.
I would
That
say
need
half
to
of
work
them
in
would be
empathy
care
because they
managers.
just suffered loss. Wow.
Half of them would be potential care managers.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to read it carefully, and you need to explain every single prospect, even if they're just not even something we're looking for, that it's not a huge coincidence. In a way, it's not. Like it's connecting us to. But at that moment, when you lose a loved one, you feel like this is a calling. If I'm in technology and this is a company that is dealing with that mission, then I need to be there. It's very strong. Once you're in the moment, and I see it with our enterprise clients. When I'm talking to a large employer, or when I'm talking to a life insurance carrier, and the other person on the line was an executor, or his wife is currently being tasked with winding down her dad's affairs, it's a much, much easier call. But this is the whole point. Like eventually it's gonna happen. It's not about like, is he the right customer? It's like, is it the right timing?
Right.
And once they get it, once they get like, oh, if I buy this to my employees at checkout.com, if I buy this for my employees at Guess Jeans or a few brands that recently joined, then I'm helping them bring their whole selves back to work after this meaningful life event. By the way, very similar to what happened with maternity. If you think a decade back.
Maternity leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maternity leave and maternity care. So maternity leave would be the time and pay. And maternity care, amazing companies like Clio and Maven and others that are building a layer on top. So the employee could really re-engage with work fully. That's needed, not only for this type of a life transition, but also for this type of a life transition. It's the same.
So this is a good transition to the business evolution here, right? Initially, you thought you'd at least start with kind of a business to consumer, download in the App Store kind of business. Over time, you've transitioned to more what we would call B2B2C, which is your two sets of customers are life insurance companies and then enterprises in the HR stack, right? Yeah, where they have maternity benefits, maternity leave, and now bereavement leave. Take me through that transition from going from, okay, we're going to be a B2C company to say, hey, we still need to focus on the consumer experience here because they are the consumer of this product and we need to have empathy. But I got to go work through life insurance companies, some of the biggest in the United States, and enterprises. Take me through that transition as an entrepreneur and what it means for the business and what are the benefits, for example, life insurance companies are getting out of it.
So when we got started, we knew this is a very broad and blue ocean. We knew there's not a single vivid brand in offline or online. There's nothing pre-need, before loss, estate planning, or at need, when you need it. There was nothing financial. There was nothing emotional. It was all open. There was no technology, at least nothing meaningful, that was at scale and a recognized brand that is handling the end-of-life category. And we did launch a direct-to-consumer product, but at the same time, we were having discussions with different enterprise companies in different categories. By the way, as you remember, much broader list of categories and industries than the two focus categories we have now of life insurance and large employers. Mm-hmm. We were in discussions and commercial agreements with some of the biggest funeral homes in the United States, the top 5 hospice chains, senior living, flower shops. And the reason is, this is where a lot of the bereaved come to. And this is where they need help. When you zoom out eventually on direct-to-consumer, yes or not, like doing it or not, it comes to CAC and LTV. Because
Customer acquisition costs and long-term value.
yes, I think when you have an infrequent product, like a Zillow, a TurboTax, an Airbnb, a Casper, Warby Parker, even if it's offline or online, when it's a brand that is infrequent, then it's very very challenging to do it without a good CAC LTV ratio.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike Noom or Headspace, nobody wants to be better at bereavement. Nobody wants to be a better executor. Nobody wants to be a better griever. People want to get it over with.
Right.
So it's infrequent by definition, but also something.
I want to get past this already.
Exactly. You need it. So it's much closer to a TurboTax on that sense, but even more infrequent than the annual taxation, but 100% addressable. Like,
It's almost like a vaccination. I got to get this. It hurts, but I got to get through it.
in a way,
Yeah.
but it's still more process oriented.
Yeah, and it takes longer.
It's still a relationship, not a
Yeah.
transaction. It's just not, an annual thing or something I need to do for many years in a row. So eventually, from a business perspective, when you want to make sure you have recurring revenue and not a transactional short-term business, you turn to the places where recently bereaved families go through every day. We call it RBF, recently bereaved family. This is the entity we get to empower. This is our client, the family unit, not just the brother or the sister. And the RBF is my client. And the entities that has the most recently bereaved families coming through them are, the life insurance giants and the big employers. And
How many claims do life insurance companies deal with daily?
So the top 5 could be even 600 life claims a day. They're talking about hundreds of thousands of claims every year.
A year.
It's a very accurate number. They know exactly how much they're going to have next year and the year after.
Yeah, the statistics work. In the law of large numbers here, the
Actuary.
statistics work, yeah.
Yeah, think about life insurance is a very special insurance because it's the only one that the policyholder is not the beneficiary.
Right.
Life insurance is empathy by definition because you're doing it for someone else. There's nothing selfish about life insurance. You do get peace of mind out of it, but you're putting the money for someone else.
The person who purchases the life insurance purchases it for somebody else's benefit.
They will not benefit
Right.
from this transaction.
Right.
And this is also how the authorities would look at that money and say, you know what? I'm going to tax you differently because this is not, something you're doing for yourself. Everything is baked into the administrative aspect of this. Like, is there gifting tax? And then is there inheritance tax? And is there probate and estate tax? Like, this is different country by country and state by state. But at the end of the day, countries like Israel that don't have any of what I just mentioned only do life insurance for a mortgage.
Right. Can you? I'm sitting here and I'm asking myself, can you actually? I hope the answer is yes, but I'm interested in a more nuanced answer. Can you actually scale the empathy? Like, you're getting to large numbers of customers. You've got case managers and technology. Can you actually scale this human spirit of empathy, which is clearly part of the magic of your growth? You're growing quickly, so.
I think the challenge would be alignment on tone and voice, more than scalability of a compassionate care. Because there are a lot of social workers in the United States right now that are making less than $40,000 a year. less than $50,000 a year and would want to have a very meaningful career trajectory. And the challenge is, how do you have a strong back office that is taking away their mundane and helping maximize, let's say they work X amount of hours a day, all of that X about face-to-face care, and taking away all the research and homework and answers, because that will cut the conversation.
And that makes them more empathetic over time, you think, in answers for tone and voice?
Yes, if I'm having a discussion with you right now and supporting you over the phone, and we're really getting to a place where, I understand why you're not getting any help from your sister, or why is this emotionally hard for you to talk about with the surviving parent or whatnot. And then I need to stop that conversation and go to the government website to check if you really deserve something or what's the exact percent of. If I have all that coming to me and I can send it to you right after the call and say, don't worry about it, don't take notes, just focus on this right now. This is just one example how at the end of the day, the quality of care is going to be higher.
One of the things you just said now just struck a chord with me, and I hadn't thought about it before. So there's this
is
graph.
great. We're gonna do a product session right after.
This is a board meeting in live. But there's this graph that's made the rounds for a while. I think it was the American Enterprise Institute who put it out first, and Mark Andreessen's been tweeting it around for the last bunch of days also, in which you see that the cost of everything technologically oriented has gone way down, and the cost of everything that the government's got its hands on, like education, keeps going up and is bankrupting families, healthcare, education, et cetera. You just made a super interesting observation, which I hadn't thought of, which is we took social workers who are underpaid for being kind of the first line of defense for so many critical parts of society. And the job they do is an unbelievable yeoman's effort. And you said, well, they got to go, tick off a bunch of things on what's likely a lousy technology experience government website, which saps their time, their energy, their tone of voice, and their empathy. And we've automated that. Now, not only that, but they can handle more cases in that way. And it all of a sudden occurs to me that by private enterprise and empathy.com, automating away what the government has not succeeded in doing of their own technology infrastructure, we can increase compensation for a lot of these frontline workers by simply making them more productive and not waiting for the government to do it, and that there's enormous opportunity to grow the economic pie. This is kind of what I've been talking about in my other field of interest, which is this notion I coined called covenantal capitalism, which is we can grow this pie using innovation and technology.
Especially if we get more people to aspire to work in a caring environment, because it's not just about increasing the pie of dollars per employee. It's about creating the incentives and the lagging indicator of a teenager in Alabama right now that is aspiring to become a caregiver, that is aspiring to become a nurse, that is aspiring to work in a hospice and not just be a TikTok influencer. Because that's really the gap, where the gap is right now. And a lot of the aspirations are heavily correlated with the ability to make wealth.
There's not a lot of empathy on TikTok. I'd argue
No.
there's a limited amount of humanity on there also, but maybe that's for a different case.
But there could be.
Maybe there could be. I'm not sure the medium is well set up for it. But you just talked about this kid in Alabama aspiring to be a frontline care worker, and by the way, being a good, well-paying job with the right mission, et cetera. What drives you every day, and what gets you out of bed to get after this hard topic, challenging topic?
It's not hard for me anymore. It was at the early days, and I had my fair share of loss myself, and I also know the other founders in the limited ecosystem of end-of-life technology, and I can tell you, the one I appreciate more, the ones I compete with, they're all mission-driven. Nobody gets into this line of business if they're not serious about alleviating someone else's pain.
And what makes you serious about it?
What gets me out of bed very quickly every morning is knowing that if it's going to be a good day or a bad day, it was a fight worth fighting. It's kind of one of those things that, when you're truly mission driven, like it's okay, even if someone else will beat you to it, as long as it's the right alignment of interest, and everything we're doing is only to benefit other families.
Can I ask you about the personal grief and what drives that?
Sure. Look, it's I don't think a lot of your listeners are aware, but in addition to my big brother Eyal, who's also very active in the local ecosystem, we had another brother, Amir Zichron Livracha, who passed away out of cancer at an early age, and it impacted everyone, of course, mostly my mom, and I can't say there's a single person in the family that wasn't heavily impacted, but she was so obsessed and hard at work to create a fun house and a good, healthy environment at the house that had to kind of hide the grief and the processing. And having two daughters myself today, I can't even imagine the length and the challenges of raising two boys by her own once Amira has passed. And in many ways, Israel is a good place to lose a loved one.
Yeah. If you don't see it on thing, he put his fingers up to put quotation marks in terms of a good place, quote unquote.
Loss can never be good, but I can tell you it's far more taxing in the U.S. Literally, it's very challenging, and
Israel's a more empathetic society, and it's more used to dealing with it.
The density. Of course, religion has an aspect of loss, and there's a lot of beautiful things in the Islam and Christianity about loss. I think Judaism is doing an exceptionally good work around loss, and the culture, the customs of Shiva are very, very smart and very, very empowering. And once you study grief, you understand why. But at the end of the day, it's going to be hard. It's going to be emotionally draining. And growing up, I had a lot of questions about loss. And at some point, I even, made my mom worried. And she took me to a few professionals to see if this is something I can please stop asking questions about. And eventually, at like age 12, I understood nobody really wants to have that conversation with me. So it's not that it's not interesting to me. How come we're all playing this game without talking about there's an end date? We're building these towers. We're starting these companies. We're going to school. We're playing these games. And I understood it's just not something people are comfortable talking about. And I stopped. I never stopped thinking about it, but I stopped talking about it. It was actually when I was here at Aleph, taking a full year, January 1st until January 1st, to think about big topics I care deeply about. When I went back to saying, wait, this is it. This is the single largest consumer sector that is untouched by innovation. What are we talking about here?
We can make a difference.
This is completely unspoiled by software. We're talking about what engineers could do all day. We're talking about what design could do. This is it. This is the single largest place, the single largest sector that is untouched. If I can bring my knowledge, my experience, and my ability to team up with resources and talent and mush that together behind a brand-first approach that will first fight the aversion and make this a rewarding place to work, a rewarding product for customers, and a positive ROI for clients, then I can't do anything better with my time.
So your brother Eyal is also an entrepreneur. Your mom must have done something right.
Or very wrong.
Two entrepreneurs. What happened in the house? What were they feeding you?
Well, my mom is definitely an amazing entrepreneur. She ran a meaningful chain of pharmacies back in the 80s. in Haifa. And while many people think we learned a lot from our dad, who was also a very
entrepreneur.
meaningful entrepreneur in the 80s in Israel. I didn't grow up with him at all. I did learn a lot from my mom. And if I have to highlight one thing is, how you treat clients. And it was never, instead of us and instead of family time, but the prioritization was clear that, there's a late night call, you pick up the call, you take the, you take the call and you see what the client wants and how can you help. And, we've seen a customer approach from a very early age, thanks to our mother.
You got 2 daughters so far. What?
Yeah, one of the things I was oversecured about when I was with Aleph is not just I'm going to start an end of life company, it was also I'm going to beat you to it and have more kids than you. The physics here are gonna get in the way, but I'm on it.
All right, good.
Okay.
So
Don't be worried.
I'm not worried, and I'm not judgmental either. But what are the values you want your daughters to grow up on? By the way, it's not a physics problem; it's a biology thing. But that's for a whole different conversation.
But once you say physics, it sounds right. I think there's a lot of nice words I can use to say how I want them to be unconditional and caring, and eventually what I want them to have and what I want people to say about them, and even selfishly what I want people to say about me when I'm not here is just being a good friend. I would love people to say, during their life and after, that my daughters were good friends to the people around them.
Before I get to my rapid fire questions, I have an observation.
You're already doing the rapid questions.
No, you're answering them short. The Gifts Project, there was you started Empathy. There's Matan Bar, he started Melio. There's Erez Dickman, who is the head of engineering at Lemonade. There's Yon, who's your co-founder. All of you were at the Gifts Project. Did I miss anyone?
There's many more good people were there. We were very lucky. And of course, Maya.
And Maya, it's a little bit like the PayPal mafia.
We got Danny Friedland, who started Walnut. And we were very lucky. And Ziv Meltzer, who started Hello Heart.
Right.
We had a very smart.
It's like the PayPal mafia. I'm just paying attention to that now.
Definitely not as big as the PayPal mafia.
Right.
I would say it's the Boulevard mafia. Maybe.
The Boulevard. But it was like 25, 30 million people. And you were like the first startup to move on into Tel Aviv, onto Rothschild Boulevard, which is now famous. But you were literally the first startup to move on. What happened at the Gifts Project?
I think it was like 3 of us at the time. I think Face.com and Saludo were basically...
Face.com started by Eden Shochat, my partner, and Saludo.
A few weeks or months before us, here hiding on the boulevard. We didn't make a big deal out of it. It was just a cheap, affordable place to get a nice, vibrant office at the time.
But what happened? How did all these people go on to do such amazing things? What happened at the Gifts Project?
Can't take any credit for that.
Was it the eBay training afterwards and PayPal and C2C payments?
Maybe it was the kind of heavy enterprise culture that we had at eBay that pushed everyone back to startups. Or maybe we just, got lucky and hired, smarter people than us very, very early. And I think, I think we can both agree, teaming up with Matan and Erez on your very first startup is, that's like a
Did you all grow up in Haifa?
Yeah.
Which is amazing. The amount of entrepreneurs that come out of Haifa is amazing. Everyone thinks Tel Aviv, but it's actually a lot of Haifa people who've come south to Tel Aviv.
Especially with Aleph. You look at...
Shai Winiger at Lemonade.
And Matan, and Yaniv Tros, and Ziv Paz.
Ziv Paz. We got a bunch.
And Erez.
I'm sure there are others.
Myself and many other of your founders here.
Yeah, Ami Daniel.
Of course,
There's another one. Yeah. So, quick rapid fire questions, and then I'm going to make a loop back to a topic. So, number one, what makes you human? What makes you vulnerable?
My kids.
That's fair. So in 100 years, they're going to write the biography of Ron Gura. What will the title be?
The X Project.
Explain.
as you might recall from the official documents, even here at Empathy, it's called the Empathy Project.
Right.
We had the GIFT Project.
Right.
Who knows what's coming next?
Okay.
For profit or non-profit. I think if it's going to be a book, it needs to be cheesy. And if it's going to be cheesy, it's going to have an X project title.
It's funny. I would have titled your book Empathy, but what do I know?
Too many. We overused it for today.
It's overused. Okay. I want to circle back to close this out to AI. And I want to play the world forward, 5 or 10 years and ask you, where do you think human empathy goes in an era of AI?
If I get to wear my naive pink rose glasses here, as founders, we get to wear these all the time. I would say it's going to be great.
Tell me more.
I would say a lot of the mundane work, a lot of the financials, a lot of the calculations, and a lot of the research will be done for us. And more of our kids will become artists and caregivers and have compassionate conversations with their friends and loved ones, paint and write songs.
There's an embedded assumption in there that harder work or grinding work or mundane work makes people less empathetic. Are you certain that's true?
I think how they work and grind their work is correlated with more, with less face time with people. Of course, there are a few professions, like psychologists could be very hard at work and in front of people all day. But I think 90% of the job families, if they work really hard, it means they spend less time with fellow humans. And when you spend less time with fellow humans, you miss a lot of the original AI, which is hand gestures and blinking and, face movements. And when you lose sight of that, it's harder to understand what Michael is feeling right now when his, mouth is doing this and his nose is doing that. And once we're back conversing with one another, spending time in a physical space right next to each other, I think we're going to be more compassionate and we're going to be more capable of understanding the other person's needs.
I once thought, and with this we'll finish, that when they started talking about like embedded computing, that computing being embedded around, you could kind of get away from like looking at this thing. And so you could pick your head up and see actually, the eyes of other human beings. And that would also be a step forward. And this is just some sort of interim phase in which we've gotten distracted from our humanity. Ron, thank you for joining. I appreciate your doing this and being
fun.
so
Thanks for having me.
Human with me. You can find Empathy on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. That's at Empathy on Twitter. And you can follow Ron Gura, that's spelled Rongura, on both LinkedIn and Twitter. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please rate us 5 stars on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe and tell all your friends to subscribe. Ron, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Michael. See you soon.